let's see, this week's discussion, since many are asking about it, you turn in your EKG homework. There is a little quiz, but the quiz is mostly about EKG, I think. It's like how do you measure, what need do you look at, that kind of thing. Then Amy or Saki will review. We have this nice little EKG review for you guys to start to get ready for Friday's quiz, so lots of good time. And then the rest of the discussion is reserved to prep you for your midterm. So if anyone has questions about the midterm, if you had a good weekend and got some studying, but a few blocks that you weren't sure about, that's what the discussion this week is for. Does anyone have a number 7 podcast for this year? Because I know I changed the lecture a little bit, and I almost posted last year's podcast, but okay. Well, if anyone has a number 7 podcast, post it. Send it to me, and I'll post it. Happy. What else? What does this say? So this week's discussion is a review. By the way, next week's lab will also be a discussion. The lab structure is going to break apart a little bit, so you're going to have 2 discussions in a row. And that's because you're just about, after you finish these 2, get through midterm and finish a discussion, we're going to start exercise testing. And it's better to just keep doing your exercise tests over and over. So we have 2 labs in a row where all you're doing is coming to lab and trying to work through your lab group, each having an exercise test at about an hour piece. Your second lecture quiz is this coming Friday, and we're going to do it at the end of the lecture. The last 20 minutes of the lecture will be quiz 2, and this quiz, lecture quiz, only covers up to Wednesday's material. Your midterm is on Monday. It covers up to this Friday, and the only difference between this and this is that means it covers the ventricular arrhythmia. Only a third of your midterm is EKG. Don't forget the 2.5 weeks of cardiovascular physiology that we just finished doing, because that's 2/3 of the exam. And the content of the midterm is roughly 2. It's really about 1.5 questions per lecture on everything up through Friday. Everyone all on page? Getting recharged there, Lara? Very good. That's sad. Come to school and have no charge. I understand. Is it a metaphor? Who knows? So, starting up with the ventricular axis, I want to kind of do a little review, kind of what me and Kelly were doing before class started. That the easiest way to get a ventricular axis is to look at lead 1. I always think he's wrong with you. Look at lead 1 and lead F. If both are up, that the confluent Venn diagram of up and up confines it to there. And so that's the quadrant of normalcy. If, as in the case of B, we have it coming towards 1 here and saying it's somewhere in this hemisphere, but it's going away from F up here. Now we're in this problematic upper left quadrant where 1/3 of it is normal and 2/3 of it is abnormal. There's 2 ways to deal with this. I was showing Kelly one way. Kelly, look at lead 2 in this one. Is lead 2 predominantly positive? Not really. It's almost isoelectric, which would mean that it's traveling. What we're doing is lead 2, here's lead 2, is perpendicular to the boundary line of normal versus abnormal. So if lead 2 is positive, it's in here. If lead 2 is bipolar, and actually anytime you find a bipolar lead, let's try this, a lead that is small and perfectly bipolar, the axis is traveling perpendicular to that. So looking through here, you could look there and say, oh, well, wherever it's going, it's perpendicular to 2. So you find 2, you make a perpendicular sign, so it's traveling along here. Yet remember, you have one more step. You have to then look at AVL versus something over here to be sure it's upright. Well, AVL here is very much upright. So you go, oh, it's -30. Let's do this one, trying the isoelectric approach. If you look across, these all have voltage except L is really quite small. It's the closest you're going to get to isoelectric. So if it's perpendicular to L runs there. oh, it's the reverse of what we just did. Perpendicular would be 2. Is 2 strongly positive? Yes, the most positive of any of them. So the most voltage, so this is about plus 60. This is about negative 30. Is that all fitting into your worldview at this point a little bit? Cool. And I think I posted, oh look, here's the answers. Positive 60, negative 30. Right? So you can see the answers. We talked about axis deviation last time. I'm glad I put it on the board. So axis deviation is non-specific abnormality. It's like a fever. You don't know exactly what's wrong, you just know something's wrong. Generally speaking, ventricular axis shifts towards muscle mass, because the more mass, the more electricity. We'll learn later why axis usually moves towards the bundle branch block. We'll go through that in more detail later. And then, of course, if a piece of heart is dead, it ceases to make electricity, and so the electrical axis shifts away from dead spots. Make sense? All right, we're ready to do this lecture, summarize axis, check. We are now, for the next 3 lectures, going to work on one topic, which I will tell you in a moment. What we're doing with all of the electrocardiographic lectures is building a system. And I'll say a little bit more about step 0, which is basically step 0 is this an EKG? And if it is it worth trying to interpret it? Right. Is it interpretable? So we'll work on that in a second. Then you guys now know how to do rates. The assessment of the conduction system is remarkably easy. You measure the PR interval, and you measure the width, QRS. And that tests the supraventricular and the ventricular conducting systems. You now know how to determine the axis. So our next step is rhythm, and rhythm is the most complex of these steps because in all 3 lectures this week are about rhythm. That's all they're about. The reason rhythm is complex is there's so many different ways for it to get funky. Rhythm, is the relation of one beat to the next and their timing. And just like with drum lines in a song, there's a whole bunch of different ways for rhythm to get off. And we'll talk about that today. How many people had that question that Saki's group had where an abnormal rhythm versus an irregular, you had questions about? Yeah. For the most part, any rhythm that is not normal sinus rhythm, which I will define in about 4 slides, what normal sinus rhythm is. Anything at rest that's not normal sinus rhythm is a variant of normal. So in that sense, it's abnormal. Now, the problem with abnormal is it makes a judgment, and there's scales of abnormal. You can have abnormal that's life-threatening, and you can have abnormal that's kind of, okay, fine. Variance. So, we'll talk about it. Let me, for just a second, turn to, is it an EKG? You've already checked out axis. And I want to point out one thing. Lead AVR is the only one of the leads that has its positive pole in the upper right corner. It looks from here. What that means, since almost all of the electrical events of the heart proceed downward and to the left, AVR should be completely downward. So let's check this out. Sorry, that's a little pale. 1, 2, 3, R, L, F. Look at AVR. The P wave is down, the QRS is down, the T wave is down. Someone was looking at this and said, if I turn it up, you're looking at it over my desk and said, it looks normal. I looked at it upside down. Right. It's supposed to be that way. And it turns out if you do have a 12 lead, the first place your eyes should go before you even do rate is AVR down, down, and down. Because if it is, you probably, whoever handed you this electrocardiogram probably did it right. If AVR is not down, down, and down, the first thing to suspect is the electrocardiogram was improperly performed. Right? There are biological causes of that, but it's rare. Is this an So here's an electrocardiogram. Would you like to try to interpret this? All right, so first off, it's off scale for long periods of time. So if there was something important happening here, you can't know it. Then the other key to deciding if it's an electrocardiogram is we're very much harnessed to this idea that each beat should have a sequence of electricity that's reliable. P, QRS, T. Sometimes you'll see those get a little out of order, but for the most part, there have to be those waves that are distinguishable. Can you even see spikes here? Spikes are QRS complexes. I don't even see QRS, so I would hand this back and say, this is not an EKG, I don't know what to do with it. Okay. Now, look carefully at that one based on what I just told you. Don't do the axis, just look at the 12 lead. Remember, I just told you the first place you should look when someone hands you 12 lead. See it? AVR is up, up, and up. The only thing that is likely to cause that is complete situs inversus, where the heart is installed backwards in the chest. That's really rare. I can't remember, 1 in 50,000 people. By far, the most likely thing that's happened is a right arm and left arm have been switched, or the right leg has been switched with one of the arms. That's what does this most of the time. So the first thing you do is go and check the leads. And then the second thing you do is listen to the right side of the patient's chest. But even that, I've only heard that once. In one of my medical school tests, they brought in someone with sinus inversus and had us do a chest exam on them to see if we could pick it up. Very hard. But, yeah, so this was, if you actually try to do this, it's an extreme right axis deviation. Everything else looks so normal that it's like, no, this is probably switched limbs. And in fact, it was. All right, so now we're ready to talk about rhythm. Davida Ma, like the Rastafarian said. So remember, a lot of you are going to try to ask me, why does that happen? Why does that happen? And the answer is basically because entropy is a very powerful force in the universe. Look at your own bedrooms. Look at your computer files. Perfect order is very difficult to maintain. And the older you get, I was saying in my 101 class, second law of thermodynamics is a bitch. The older you get, the more chaotic everything is. The fact that I'm standing up in front of you wearing clean underwear is a miracle. So, there's a whole bunch of different rhythms, and let me give you some ideas. When you look at rhythms, it's better not to try to recognize it. I've done this, I've said this before. If you look at a rhythm, it's better, oh, we got V-tach. It's probably better to say, we have a wide QRS tachycardia. To say general characteristics. Anyone do bird watching? You guys are kind of young for bird watching. But when you go bird watching, read a thing in the paper about bird watching, then it reflects the scientific principle where you go out and you don't say, that's a golden shafted flicker. You look at it and go, well, it has a black badge on it. You look at the characteristics first, then you add it up. Well, it turns out for rhythm, again, because there's so many different birds, there's also so many different rhythms, it's good to do that. So there's 4 characteristics you assess before you think about what a rhythm might be. You look for its rate. For instance, you guys know bradycardia and tachycardia, right? You also look for timing. If one beat is early relative to others, or one beat is late. So this is ongoing, that's isolated. You look at the width of the QRS, and for the most part, if you see a narrow spike, it came through fast, meaning it came through the normal conducting system. So almost certainly a narrow QRS means it came through the AV node. On the other hand, Kelly, we talked about this, if you see a very wide QRS, it's probably ventricular in origin. Single exception, there's bundle branch blocks where it did come from above, but one of the Purkinje branches is dead. But for the most part, if you see an isolated wide beat, it's going to be your treatment. We always chercher la paix in French. We look at the P wave. And there's several things. You'll see that to be normal, the P wave has to be upright at beat 2. That's a strict criteria for normal sinus rhythm. You want to make sure the P wave is causing the QRSs around it, right? So it has to be with what I call striking distance, one big block, so the QRS it causes. And then, for instance, I think you guys already can appreciate, what if you had 3 Ps for every QRS? Is that usual? Oh, that's weird, right? And so if you have multiple Ps for every QRS, it implies the AED node is intermittently failing to do its job. That would be a form of block. So the last one, and this will help you guys with, because many of you said, what is abnormal versus irregular? Abnormal is a judgment, and it means anything that is not normal sinus rhythm, which I think is my next slide. Irregular, there's different kinds of regularity refers to the relationship of one cardiac cycle to the next. I was listening to some country music last night, and there was 2/4 times. 2/4 times like a two-step. It's really boring. That's 2/4 times. Premature, look through here. Do you see one that came early? See how it grabs your eye? This one is out of frame. There are, you'll hear the term sometimes, regularly irregular. And that sounds contradictory, but what it means is the irregularity repeats itself. And so the classic one is group beating, where you get a bunch of QRSs and a long pause, a bunch of QRSs and a long pause. So that at least has some sort of predictability to it. The term one of you was asking me about, because they were dealing with a physician who was whipping out a bunch of words. Oh, someone here diagnosed AFib with their fingers. I'm so proud of them, whoever they were. Good for you. There's a term, irregularly irregular, meaning complete chaos. And if you measure an R to R interval in any of these, it is never repeated. So each R to R is its own unique thing. That is one of the hallmarks of atrial fibrillation, which is epidemic in the old people of this country. So does this give you a sense of what these are? Rate, QRS width, P wave, and the regularity. So let's do the easy one. Actually, it's actually the hard one, because when someone gives you an EKG on an exam, you're almost sure it's abnormal. So a really cruel trick to do is give you normal on an exam, because you have to go through all of these, and then you go, oh. So normal sinus rhythm is the only, this is a technical term. I know it sounds like, no, it's a technical term. They are in NSR. The patient is in normal sinus rhythm. This has a specification for every one of these 4 things. The rate must be between 60 and 100. If someone that has a heart rate at 101 as they roll into the ER, they are not in NSR. They are in sinus tachycardia. They have left the boundaries of normal. Okay? The QRS width. The QRS must be narrow, meaning it must be less than 2.5 little boxes, which is just about what this is. 1, 2, and a little bit. The P wave must be upright in lead 2. This is a requirement. If you think about what it means, lead 2 sits here. And so it's telling you the P wave, to be sinoatrial, starts at the top of the right atrium and moves downward to the left. And so an upright P wave means this is sinoatrial. And then finally, the QRSs should be regularly spaced. And the single exception would be you're allowed to accelerate a little bit when you inhale and slow down when you exhale. So see how evenly spaced these are? This is normal sinus rhythm. That's the only normal resting EKG. Has 4 characteristics. Okay, so let's do, you've seen this variation. Let's try all of our things. So rate was the first one. And when you look at this, the problem is there seem to be multiple rates. These QRS spikes seem closer together than this one or the one on the end. So if you're going to do, one way to deal with that is to do a range of rates. So I'm going to do it this way because it's easier for me. I can touch there. Now I put that up against a big box. 300, 150, 100. It's really hard to do this. 75, 60, 50, 40. So this is bradycardia. When the patient inhales, it speeds up. That lines up in the big box. So 300, 150, 100, 75, 60, and a little bit shorter. So actually, this is a bradycardia overall, but there's two different rates, fast start inspiration. So this is actually going to come out to be a sinus bradycardia. If this is lead 2, P waves are upright. There's only one per narrow QRS, so it meets those criteria. And the regularity is the only irregularity that's the normal variant, which is the sinus arrhythmia, or the so-called Bainbridge reflex, if you're an old physiologist. I was realizing that I'm both. I'm a physician and an old physiologist, so I can call whatever I want. Everyone recognize that from their own electrocardiograms? Okay. So this makes the point as we begin. We're going to start for the rest of the week. We're going to talk about all the different ways that rhythm can go awry. It says up here, fortunately for staying alive, but unfortunately for learning. Beats can originate from all sorts of different places. So I'm going to start in on supraventricular beats. And among the places you could get, sinoatrial is your normal one. The AV node is quite capable of generating a sustained rate as high as 60. It can also kick out early beats if for some reason it's irritated, it's getting a lot of sympathetic stimulation, that sort of thing. And then the atrial tissue itself is capable of depolarizing. This would be an ectopic atrial pacemaker. And again, for reasons often in the atria, it has to do with stretch. If the atria is overloaded, it's overloaded in someone with congestive heart failure, fluid's backing up and stretching the atria. You'll get atrial tissue itself speaking out. So let's try some. Okay, look at this. Which one of these is not like the other ones? Third, you see it? This looks like it's a V1. It's a downgoing lead, so it's probably V1 or something like that. And these are all basically, but this is early. See how that's early? Look at the, what do we call babies that come early? Premature, so some kind of premature baby. Notice the P waves here are almost indistinguishable in the native. They're very small and a little bit bifid or flat, plateau. Notice this one is much larger and it actually has a different PR interval. So this is a beat. It appears to be coming from the atria because the QRS is narrow, so it's using the AV node. So it's coming from the atria. This is a atrial premature beat. It's often called a PAC, premature atrial contraction. In PAC, it's like the first or second most common of the early beats. The only thing that competes with it is premature ventricular contractions are also really common. Look down here. Oh, we have a similar situation. So always when you look, the first thing to do is sort of get oriented to what is the native rhythm, the background rhythm, what is the closest to normal this person can approximate. And to me it looks like these. See this, that, those are the normal beats. Does everyone see that this one is early relative to a rather slow rate, 300, 150, 100, 75, 60, shift. Yeah, this is right at 60. So this is normal sinus rhythm at the low end of normal. So tell me about this beat. First off, it comes early, so it becomes premature. What else can you identify about? Does everyone notice the P wave is upside down? Which is interesting because it's being looked at from lead 1. That implies the atria is going off from left to right. Right? And notice how the PR interval is also short, slightly shorter here. So that's almost certainly a premature atrial contraction. It's an ectopic beat. And in this particular case, because we have a lead and a positioning, it probably came from the left side of the heart. The left atrium. Or the leftish side of the right atrium. Am I making sense? What did I call this? Oh, the upside down nature, it could be on the left side. It also could be an AV junctional beat. And there's a problem with this is, let's see if I can make words right. A beat that comes from, an extra beat that say comes from right there, an ectopic beat, you cannot distinguish it from a beat coming from the AV node. And so in this case, it looks like in the lecture I've written junctional premature. I just told you it was a left or low atrial prematurity. You can't tell the difference. At least I can't. Not outside of the cath lab, you can't tell the difference. Okay? So let's look at this idea that the junction can actually generate beats. If this was a little shorter, let's actually measure the PR interval, because that actually can tell you something about it. So the natural PR interval here is about 4 little boxes, or 0.16 seconds. Now the PR interval here, oh, I see why I said it. The PR interval here is less than 3 little boxes. That is too fast to actually have started in the atrium and then get. So what this is saying is the shortness of the PR interval implies the impulse actually rose in the AV node and then simultaneously released it up and down, up to the atrium and down. Yes, sir?
Because it's closer to the ventricle?
Yeah. So that is the characteristic of AV junction beats. There's sort of 3 options. The easy one is you get a narrow QRS. Look at C first. You get a narrow QRS that is normal. Here's lead 2. Normal upright. This looks wide because it's a highly magnified. But there's no preliminary P wave. Whereas if it originated in the AV node, whereas the P wave, it's buried in here. The AV node started it and it fired up and down simultaneously. And so the atrial contraction, the P wave, is invisible against the great mass of the ventricular electricity. Then I like this one. This is my favorite. This is when you're dead sure it came from the AV node. Watch. In lead 2, there's nothing preliminary. You get a narrow QRS, and then in back of the QRS, you get an upside down P wave. The reason I love that is the way scientific causation works. The cause usually has to be in front of, precede the event it causes. Is that causing that? It cannot be, and therefore, something is causing both of these things that's invisible. Oh, it's the AV node went off right about here, released its electricity first into the ventricle, and then passed it up to the, so absolutely, if you have a retrograde, or after the fact P wave, sorry, yeah, if you have an after-the-fact P wave, you've got a junctional node. Here's the one that we just did, which confuses me. In order to be sure that this is not just a low atrial pacemaker, a low ectopic, this has to be shorter than 3 little boxes. So they just barely did it here. Okay, I admit that is an AV junctional. Now, if this P wave was upside down and had a sufficient time, implying it started at one end of the AV node and went all the way through it, then it becomes a low junction. Yeah, that doesn't matter. And I'm not going to ask you a lot of questions.
For lead 2B,
Yeah.
the first download, sorry, you're saying that is, so the AV node has already fired.
Yeah, the AV node fired right about here. And it went off. Remember, it has a slow conduction, so let's say it went off right here. It finally releases its energy downward into the His bundle, but to go back up, it's almost like you start to have to think about the AV node as an anatomic structure that's this big, big magnification. And it's an AV node depolarized here. It's going to first release to the His bundle in one little box, and then it's going to take 2 or 3 little boxes before it releases to the atrium, as it winds through itself through the maze. And I do that just about right. 1, 2, 3, 3.5 little boxes to go to the atrium, 1 little box to go to the. Okay? Now, junctional rhythms can be isolated. You can have a single junctional beat. You can also have protracted. So let's just first look at this one. P QRS T, long pause. Can't say P QRS T. By the way, it's really a good practice. I call this the P QRS T mantra. Whenever you start to figure something out, start with going P QRS T, P QRS T. Right away it breaks the mantra, and it's like, oh, I have to pay attention to this. QRS, we'll figure out that, T, QRS T. So what we have here is an interrupt, a failure of sinus propagation. This looks like, it's hard to see because of the moire distortion, but that's about 60 or 65. And it's replaced by a much slower rate, probably in the range of 40. And what's that? That's your upside down P wave propagating back up into the atria. This would be called a junctional escape beat, or escape rhythm. The term escape means when a faster pacemaker fails and the backup is finally allowed to do its backup job, we use the term escape. And it has escaped from the normal rate domination of the single atrial node. Normally the single atrial node always wins because it's faster. Here it has failed for a sufficiently long time. It's like, remember, the AV node's like an understudy. I'm finally on! I'm on stage! And so it gets to run. I'm sure it's very exciting for you. Look down here. Again, you try to say P QRST to it, and you QRST. QRST, the QRSs are narrow, so this is something from supraventricular. The rate here, well, that one lines up. The rate here is 300, 150, 100, 75, 60, 50, 43. Right in the range that you'd expect for a junctional rhythm. So this again is a sustained junction. Again, you guys are going to ask me why? I don't know. Because life is chaotic. Well, why did their single atrial node check out? Oh, because Ignacio works in a lab with animals where sometimes they have to deal with pesticides in the water. Let's say the pesticide that this agricultural worker was exposed to was an acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. So it was a chemical that stops the breakdown of acetylcholine. As acetylcholine builds up, what kind of heart rate would you expect? Slower. And generally speaking, the sinoatrial node, one of the reasons it wins is it has more receptors for exogenous or hormonal influence. And so right now, the sinoatrial node has been stunned by a pesticide overdose. And so the junctional pacemaker, which also has receptors for hormonal influence, but a lot fewer, so it's not as susceptible. So it's taken, I just made up a story. It's okay? Because I know you guys are always really kind and want to know what's up. Can I really be done that early? That seems far. Any questions about that so far? I'm going to just tee up next lecture. It'll be a good thing to not be too far. I'm not going to do a lot because I know you don't have the slides. But let me just bring up the general topic of next time. So we just did, we're starting supraventricular beats. We saw you can have ectopic beats coming from the generalized atrium. The sign of an AV nodal beat is that retrograde or after the fact P wave, or an upside down P wave that is too close to the QRS to be typically positive, typically causative. Now let me just, so the next topic that we're going to try, starting Wednesday, I'll post this up in a second, before Wednesday, is oh, this is fun. Let's just try this since we have a little time. Let's analyze this rhythm. So based on what I've said, this is from a review from last time. from the lecture I just gave. So first off, does it look like an EKG? Yes, it's an EKG. We don't have AVR, it's not 12 leads, so we don't need to look at AVR. We have P, QRST, P, QRST, P, QRST repeatedly. The P is always in front of a narrow QRS. The P is upright in D1. We'll take it as being close to normal. What is the rate here? Ready? 100. And boy, it's really right at 100. So you could call it a borderline tachycardia, or you could say it's normal sinus rhythm at the upper range of rate, 90 mL. Is that okay? What else can we say about it? The PR interval is, there's one P for every QRS, and the PR is close to a narrow QRS, meaning this is causing that. Okay? Good. Did we do it right? Oh, we did. Okay. Let's just try this one, okay? So we have lead 2, P, QRST, P, QRST, P, QRST, P, QRST, P. What is the rate? Does anyone see one that lines up? It's hard when you're too close to the dark lines. Ow, it hurts my eyes. I think this one almost lines up. That's a dark box. So you ready? 300, 150, 100, 75, and shift, so it's right about 73. So by rate, it's normal. Is the P wave upright? Yes. Does every P wave cause a narrow QRS? Yes. Is the QRS narrow? Yes. So far it's being a normal sinus rhythm. Let's do our conduction step. So once we got rate, we think about conduction. How far away is this from that? So if that starts there on a big box, what is the PR interval, in other words? It's longer than point. The maximum you're allowed is 5 little boxes or 1 big box. So this is actually a PR interval of 0.22 or 0.23. That one starts nicely, so you can count backwards. 1 little box, 1 full big box. Yeah, 0.22 seconds. So this is normal sinus rhythm, but with a first degree AV block. Is that okay? These are all reviews, and then we'll leave.
But wait, so you would say it's normal sinus rhythm with the
Yeah, I was just worrying about that myself, Quincy. Some cardiologists would say you can't call it normal sinus when there is a thing present. So you could say a supraventricular rhythm of normal rate with a first degree AV block. If you said normal sinus rhythm with first degree AV block, we would get too much flack. Everyone would know what you're saying. A first degree AV block is present and otherwise meets the criteria for normal sinus rhythm. Do this one quick. These are all reviews of what we just said. Save us time next time. So it looks like the strips, oh no, I don't know why that's so far down, and I can't tell if that P is related, whether they just started the electrocardiogram. QRST, P, QRST, P, QRST, P, oh crap. See why we say that? Isn't that helpful? Truly, that's not me acting. I was trying to go through and I got stuck. Let me go here. P, QRST, P, QRST, P, QRST. So it looks like right here is your native, as I say, your natural rhythm. The rate here is 300, 150, 175, shift, it's about 64. So it's a normal rate. P is within striking distance of this. The QRS is narrow. It's lead V3, which is why it's got these funny configurations. That's Bob Hawley's handwriting. I don't know why that's important, but I can recognize it. So this is the one that's not like the other ones if you watched TPS. So QRS is narrow or wide? Narrow. Is it early or late relative to the others? Quite early. Yeah, it's 300, 150, it's about 125 beats per minute if you strung them together, so it's way late. Is there a P wave that you can ascertain here? No. I would call this a premature junctional beat because there's no evidence of almost certainly the P wave is buried in this ventricular depolarization. That implies that the AV node started the problem and released the energy up and down simultaneously. That's a pretty good review of what we just said. By Friday, and I'm only doing this for Kelly, you'll see by Friday we'll start to talk about ventricular beats. And the big characteristic is, if you don't access the His bundle through the AV node, if you arise ectopically in the tissue of the ventricular myocytes, the only way to pass your electricity on is from, and this is what I'm saying, they're going through the intercalated sequence. The electricity is going from cell to cell, which is massively slower because the x-axis is time. What you get when you get a PVC, P, QRST, P, QRST, go longa, you get a Y, QRS. Notice this has come early. Shahan, you wanted to talk about compensatory pauses, and we find there's one here that exactly as early as this will be late, so that you get a perfectly compensatory pause in a PVC. But the primary attribute of PVCs is they come early, there's no preceding P wave, and often their repolarization and their depolarization are in opposite directions. Yes?
Is the voltage difference explained by more calcium because it takes more time to reach repolarization?
No, exactly. That's a great proposal, but no. It's explained by a lack of canceling voltages. Remember, when you use the Purkinje system, you light up the right side at the same time as you light up the left side. And so perhaps 1/4 of the voltage of the left is obliterated or canceled by the voltage going right. Does that make sense? Because this is starting either on the left or the right, the whole ventricular burns from one side to the other, and the absence of organized canceling voltages makes for a bigger total up. It's also similar to the reason of why this goes downward, is when depolarization starts from an abnormal place, repolarization starts from the same abnormal place. That's enough. That was a preview for Friday. Don't know that. Whatever I just showed you, don't know it. And we'll start up again talking about the supraventricular tachycardias next time. They're very common and very fun. Let's see. I have an office hour right now. I may stop because we're early. I may get a latte or not. And Sagi has a discussion starting at 1:10, I believe. True? Okay. Very good. Have a great week. Stay dry. Someone told me it's going to rain more today. Is that true?
He just said he was going to stop me.
It's going to rain again at some point, yeah. All week. Oh, well. Oh, no. Please just take a good break.
We got that.
These are all, yeah, not cumulative. They're only on the cumulative.